On August 7, 1942, along the shores of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands, the first light of day revealed a massive assault as 11,000 U.S. Marines charged onto the beaches, launching the initial significant Allied pushback against Japan's imperial forces. Known as Operation Watchtower, this effort signaled a pivotal shift in the Pacific conflict. Yet, amid the fierce sea clashes and grueling fights through the underbrush that ensued, a surprising tool surfaced within the thick shadows encircling the island, one derived not from metal weaponry or blasts, but from the core mechanics of spoken language. The issue arose swiftly and carried grave risks. Amid the disarray of forested battles, where sightlines shrank to just a few paces amid lush tangled foliage, and foes could mimic English speech or don seized U.S. gear, how might sentries at outposts reliably separate allies from Japanese spies slipping through American defenses under the veil of night? The response originated from an improbable angle, the articulation of a lone alphabet character. Master Technical Sergeant James W. Herbert, serving as a wartime reporter for the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve, arrived alongside the invading troops on that same day. During a recorded discussion on March 10, 1943, archived in military logs, Herbert shared first-hand insights into the verification tactic that evolved into routine protocol for the operation. His account stands as our most reliable first-hand record of phonetic checks in the Pacific arena. "We consistently use challenge words featuring the letter L," Herbert described, since experts believed the Japanese struggled with it, lacking any equivalent L in their native tongue. This straightforward insight demonstrated a keen grasp of phonetic barriers, offering crucial protection for U.S. troops across the extended fight. Still, Herbert pointed out a key drawback that highlighted its practical boundaries. The check occasionally fell short against Japanese troops trained in English, showing that Marines faced intruders with diverse language skills, rendering the strategy useful yet imperfect. By 1600 hours, 4 p.m., on August 8th, the Marines had seized the almost finished Japanese airstrip. Originally labeled Lunga Airfield by the enemy, it was rechristened Henderson Field, in tribute to Major Lofton R. Henderson, a Marine pilot lost in the Midway engagement. The site sprang to life with the arrival of the initial PBY Catalina seaplane on August 12th, and by August 20th, a steady group of 31 planes had established a base there. Dominating this airstrip turned into the central objective of the prolonged 6-month struggle, as Japanese units mounted ongoing bids to reclaim it. Safeguarding Henderson Field and its surrounding defenses grew essential. Enemy troops, showcasing the adaptability and resolve that defined their tactics across the Pacific theater, conducted multiple stealth incursions. They navigated the wilderness after dark, either in clusters or solo, aiming to scout for data, damage supplies, or confuse U.S. positions. The cover of night offered ideal cover for such breaches. Outpost guards along the boundary faced urgent choices on whether shadowy forms ahead were fellow Marines or hostile intruders. Standard recognition techniques fell short in this setting. Papers might be stolen or faked. Clothing could come from fallen foes. Features were tough to assess in the gloom. Even accents might mislead, given that certain Japanese personnel handled English to differing extents. What the Marines required was a fool-resistant technique, one that exposed true origins via traits the infiltrator couldn't fake on purpose. The fix involved leveraging the phonetic makeup of Japanese speech. To grasp its success, consider the key contrasts in auditory frameworks between Japanese and English. Japanese features a single fluid consonant, denoted in Hepburn romanization as R, yet voiced far unlike the English R or L. In phonetic terms, this Japanese element qualifies as an alveolar flap, symbolized in the International Phonetic Alphabet as R. Japanese speakers generate it via a rapid flick of the tongue against the alveolar ridge, the spot right behind the upper incisors. English, however, boasts two separate fluid consonants. The L in English forms a lateral approximant, created by pressing the tongue tip solidly to the alveolar ridge and letting airflow pass beside the tongue. The R in American English differs markedly, often as a postal veolar approximant with the tongue retracted and clear of the mouth's upper surface. These pair of English consonants claim unique spots in the sound landscape, readily separable by native English speakers. Speakers from Japan tend to group both English R and L sounds into one unified perceptual class, unlike English speakers who distinguish them clearly. This phonological distinction isn't due to any physical limitations or auditory deficits. With adequate practice, Japanese speakers are capable of articulating both English phonemes accurately, and they can detect the acoustic variations between them when isolated. The challenge lies in perception and categorization. In Japanese, these two English sounds get funneled into a solitary phonetic slot shaped by early childhood exposure to the language. Upon encountering R and L in real English conversation, the Japanese brain instinctively lumps them together under that one native liquid consonant. Investigations from the World War II era and beyond substantiated this effect. Work by Goto in 1971, Miyawaki and team in 1975, plus Takagi and Yamada in 1995 showed that Japanese individuals had trouble discerning the English-RL contrast, even following prolonged contact with English. Takagi and Yamada observed that Japanese people residing in the United States for over 12 years continued to face much greater hurdles in spotting R and L than native English users. The 1975 Miyawaki research uncovered a key insight tied to wartime uses. By altering audio clips of R and L to strip away speech-specific cues and make them less like natural talk, Japanese participants performed just as adeptly as English natives in telling them apart. This demonstrated that the issue stemmed not from detecting the raw acoustic signals, but from the mind's interpretation of them as meaningful speech elements. In terms of military defense, this phonetic fact posed a formidable barrier for Japanese troops trying to sneak in disguised. Even those with deep English study, solid command of words and rules, and ability to chat fluently would give themselves away via mispronouncing terms with L. Such articulation errors operated below conscious awareness. Amid tension, exhaustion, or haste, ingrained native speech habits would surface, no matter the spy's resolve or readiness. This tactic's success hinged on the way people form language habits in infancy, when neural pathways lock in categories for home tongue sounds, patterns that endure rigidly into adulthood, defying change despite heavy later practice. The Marines put this into action by selecting challenge phrases loaded with L's. Per Hurlbut's statements and surviving records, passcodes deliberately featured the letter L, knowing Japanese users would falter on it. During a guard's verbal test on a nearing shadow, an English native would rattle off the phrase effortlessly and spot on. A Japanese person, despite strong English skills, would usually swap in approximations from their liquid sound, yielding a noticeably offbeat result to the alert listener of the watch. A particular term has surfaced in history books, albeit from just one account. Associated Press reporter Oliver Garling included it in his 1942 release, Free Men Are Fighting: The Story of World War II, co-authored with Farah and Reinhardt. On page 315, Garling described how Japanese forces might near outposts pretending to be U.S. or Filipino troops. He noted that guards employed a test phrase like Lollapalooza, and if the opening two beats returned as roar, the guard would shoot before catching the rest. Lollapalooza proves a smart pick for such a test, assuming its use. This American slang denotes something exceptional or remarkable. It packs 4 L's in quick sequence right at syllable starts. For a Japanese speaker, every one of those L's would trip them up, rendering flawless delivery nearly out of reach absent rigorous drills. The directive to check only the initial 2 syllables holds strategic value too. It lets the guard spot flaws in the password early, cutting down on vulnerable moments in the exchange. That said, caution is warranted with the proof. Garling's volume stands as the sole reference for Lollapalooza in this context. Issued in 1942, it aligns with the time frame, and Garling's status as a reliable reporter with military connections lends weight. Yet, no separate verification shows up in Marine Corps debriefs, battle logs, or fellow eyewitness writings. Richard Tregaskis's 1943 Guadalcanal diary, drawn from his stint as an on-site journalist, skips any nod to this exact phrase. Robert Leckey's Helmet for My Pillow and similar first-hand tales likewise omit it. What we can affirm without doubt is that passwords relying on LR distinctions were routinely employed, as evidenced by Chbert's first-hand account. The possibility that Lollapalooza served as one such password seems reasonable, yet lacks conclusive evidence. This term matches the strategic needs, shows up in a period-appropriate record, and corresponds to established procedures, though further supporting details would bolster the argument. The 6-month operation extended from August 7, 1942, until February 9, 1943, when Japanese troops managed to withdraw their leftover personnel from the island. In that time frame, Marine units, bolstered later by Army reinforcements, endured relentless strain from Japanese efforts to recapture the airstrip. Key clashes encompassed the Battle of the Tanaru on August 21st, the Battle of Edson's Ridge from September 12 to 14, and the Battle for Henderson Field between October 23 and 26. Across these conflicts and the lulls in between, safeguarding the U.S. defensive lines proved essential. Tactics involving Japanese infiltration were extensively recorded. Japanese troops, typically operating in compact teams or solo, sought to breach American positions under cover of darkness. They utilized superior disguises, frequently securing foliage from the jungle to their attire. They advanced with exceptional quietness across landscapes they had thoroughly scouted. Certain individuals could speak English, and reports exist of Japanese trying to mimic U.S. soldiers. The danger proved tangible and ongoing. In his discussion, Hebert highlighted a noteworthy extra vigilance cue. At least once, a guard spotted Japanese intruders due to their overly exact phrasing, atypical for ordinary Marines. One such intruder allegedly declared, "Hold your fire. We are American Marines and wish to report our evening's activities." This led the guard to shoot right away, recognizing that no Marine would phrase it so formally. Within this setting, assessments of pronunciation offered a dependable way to detect intruders without relying on sight, official papers, or prolonged dialogue. A quick query using an L-sounding term could unmask a foe almost instantly. Its effectiveness stemmed from targeting an element infiltrators struggled to imitate, the instinctive speech habits formed through early language learning. The concept of shibboleth originates in the Hebrew Bible, specifically Judges 12:5-6, where Gileadites pinpointed adversarial Ephraimites by their failure to articulate the word properly. The Ephraimites rendered it as scythe, missing the esh sound, thus exposing their origins. Comparable verbal challenges have surfaced across military annals whenever armies required ways to separate allies from enemies, leveraging dialect variations as a dependable identifier. The Normandy landings on D-Day, June 6, 1944, applied a distinct phonetic strategy for identical aims. Their query-response protocol featured flash as the query, thunder as the response, and welcome as the reply sign. These choices targeted phonemes challenging for German speakers. The voiceless dental fricative thief sound in thunder lacks a counterpart in German, while the voiced labial via, approximate W, sound in welcome is similarly missing from standard German phonology. This comparable deployment of linguistic shibboleths in the European campaign underscores how armed services appreciated the benefits of capitalizing on phonetic variances for protection. Additional English sound challenges for Japanese included the V phoneme, non-existent in their language and often swapped for B, both the variants, voiced and voiceless, and the richer array of English vowels compared to Japanese's mere 5. Vigilant password choices might leverage these traits, although the LR contrast emerged as the predominant one according to surviving accounts. The wider framework of defensive protocols in the Pacific arena offers further insight. U.S. troops across the Pacific grappled continually with incursions, trickery, and the challenge of telling comrades from adversaries, amid situations where visual checks were frequently unfeasible. The query-response mechanism adopted by global militaries gained heightened importance in the Pacific owing to theater-specific elements. Primarily, the jungle settings of typical Pacific fights slashed sightlines sharply. Thick foliage, intense downpours, and Japan's routine night maneuvers forced sentries to rely solely on audio and spoken exchanges for verification. Additionally, Japanese strategy prioritized sneaking in, nocturnal actions, and assaults designed to sow utmost disarray and turmoil. The query response approach boasts an extensive armed forces legacy. At its core, it remains straightforward. A guard poses a challenge, often just one word, and the challenged individual must reply with the proper countersign. Failure to provide the correct response or giving an incorrect one prompts the guard to act accordingly. Several elements determine how well this method performs. To avoid detection, the challenge and countersign need frequent updates. They should reach all Allied personnel without leaking to adversaries. Ideally, selections should complicate accurate delivery by foes. The Military Intelligence Service Language School offers a compelling contrast to tales of accent verification. Founded on November 1, 1941, at the Presidio of San Francisco, it shifted to Camp Savage, Minnesota in June 1942 after Executive Order 9066 triggered the relocation of Japanese Americans from coastal regions. By August 1944, the institution transferred to Fort Snelling, Minnesota, and continued operations through June 1946. It prepared more than 6,000 Japanese American troops as linguists, translators, and intelligence experts amid the conflict. These second-generation Japanese Americans contributed vital language expertise across the Pacific Front, aiding in prisoner questioning, document analysis, and intelligence gathering. The efforts of these Japanese American language specialists proved crucial to the Allies' triumphs in the Pacific. They questioned captives, decoded seized papers, monitored and interpreted enemy broadcasts, and shared cultural knowledge that illuminated Japanese strategic mindsets for leaders. Their dedication stood out especially since numerous family members endured internment while they defended the nation. In terms of accent checks, these Japanese American troops would effortlessly clear any L-focused inquiry. Raised in U.S. settings, they mastered English with flawless native intonation from an early age. Though their skills enhanced intelligence efforts in the Pacific, it also required security teams to recognize that Japanese heritage alone did not signal opposition. Private First Class Eugene B. Sledge delivers one of the rare authenticated first-hand narratives from a Pacific veteran who later chronicled his service. Joining the Marines, he fought with K Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, 1st Marine Division. He engaged in the fierce clashes at Peleliu and Okinawa, enduring some of the war's harshest battles. Released in 1981, his memoir With the Old Breed at Peleliu and Okinawa earned acclaim as a top-tier personal depiction of frontline infantry warfare. Although Sledge missed the Guadalcanal action, he reached the island in 1944 for post-battle drills. His writing sidesteps details on accent screening, emphasizing instead the savage aspects of warfare, the mental strain of prolonged engagements, and the daily lives of Marine foot soldiers in the theater. The scarcity of accent testing references in veteran accounts carries its own lessons. Should such measures have been as widespread and intricate as certain narratives claim, we'd anticipate more references across the many published recollections. This quietude indicates that, despite validations like those from Halsey, L-rooted codes existed, but perhaps operated on a narrower or more everyday basis than retrospective stories portrayed. Effective safeguards often fade into normalcy for routine users. The Allies' ultimate win exacted a heavy toll. U.S. troops endured around 700 fatalities and more than 8,000 injuries. Japanese losses dwarfed these, with roughly 31,000 deaths, largely due to illness and famine as U.S. sea and air power blocked supply routes. A Japanese withdrawal in February 1943 rescued about 10,000 soldiers for redeployment, yet the setback proved decisive. Japan forfeited its Pacific momentum and failed to recover it. One must also consider the flaws in accent-based screening. As Herbert observed, it occasionally faltered against Japanese with English schooling. Anyone from Japan who grew up in an English-dominant setting would develop native-level speech and breeze through L-oriented evaluations. Japanese spy networks recognized this edge and sometimes deployed English-fluent agents for covert tasks. Moreover, amid battlefield turmoil, with shelling, blasts, and yells, nuanced speech variations could prove hard to discern consistently. The approach also risked mistaken identifications. Pacific U.S. units featured troops from varied origins, such as Filipino auxiliaries, Chinese Americans, and additional groups whose English security measures during World War II had to accommodate legitimate variations in English accents, including unusual pronunciations or dialects. Protocols for verification needed to handle authentic differences in how English was spoken by troops from allied nations. The sound distinctions between languages spoken in the Philippines and Japanese ensured that English users from the Philippines generally managed eel and ear-like sounds without issue, since those phonemes appear in Tagalog and various other Philippine tongues. However, their version of English could diverge from standard American accents in other respects. Even with these constraints, assessments centered on L sounds offered a clever approach to a real security issue. It capitalized on actual phonetic variations, demanded no specialized gear, allowed for rapid execution, and supplied a solid method for confirming identities when alternatives proved impractical or untrustworthy. Such evaluations succeeded by tapping into core aspects of how languages are learned. Phonetic habits formed in early years tend to stay remarkably consistent over a lifetime and resist alteration despite prolonged practice or deliberate attempts. This tale of accent-based checks holds several lessons for contemporary viewers. Historians gain a glimpse into the nuts and bolts of wartime safeguards in the Pacific Campaign. Scholars of language see tangible examples of phonetic expertise in action. For everyday readers, it delivers an intriguing case of how speech patterns could serve as a weapon in conflict. Above all, it urges caution in evaluating past narratives, urging us to separate substantiated truths from subsequent fabrications. The confirmed essence of the account is straightforward and persuasive. U.S. troops at Guadalcanal employed passcodes featuring L sounds to detect Japanese spies who found those consonants hard to articulate properly. Eyewitness accounts from those involved validate this tactic, which aligned logically with the phonetic gaps between Japanese and English and embodied resourceful problem-solving amid true threats to safety. The term Lollapalooza surfaces in a single-period document and matches the approach seamlessly, although additional validation would bolster its reliability. Outside this established foundation, numerous retellings have introduced unverified elements, fabricated figures absent from archives, and links to a supposed comprehensive strategy across the Pacific, lacking any supporting evidence. Such additions, though enhancing narrative flair, skew the factual timeline and foster misconceptions regarding the scope and implementation of accent evaluations. A truthful recounting, drawn purely from corroborated sources, stands as sufficiently impressive on its own. It reveals U.S. personnel adapting to the rigors of tropical combat, leveraging speech disparities to bolster defenses, and devising on-the-ground solutions for urgent risks. This highlights the importance of keen awareness, hands-on savvy, and openness to novel strategies. Moreover, it opens a view into the routine pressures of frontline duties in the Pacific arena, where concerns over verification, friend or foe distinction, and the ever-present danger of subterfuge posed ongoing hurdles for American units. The Marine personnel who devised and applied these accent checks merit acknowledgement for their inventive pragmatism. In the wider backdrop of the offensive, it underscores the toll of battle and the intricacies of armed endeavors, while the Japanese-American language specialists who contributed in the Pacific, frequently with relatives held in detention centers, exemplified dedication and expertise amid extreme adversity. Their role in securing triumph proved vital, enriching our grasp of the Pacific conflict's layers. To sum up, established records indicate that U.S. Marines at Guadalcanal routinely deployed passcodes with L sounds to spot Japanese infiltrators. This method, attested directly by war reporter James Halbert, drew on authentic phonetic contrasts between Japanese and English. The phrase Lollapalooza features in a reliable 1942 reference as a sample of these codes. Although wider assertions of organized testing across the Pacific lack proof, the recorded application at Guadalcanal exemplifies tactical ingenuity that tackled bona fide protection needs. Insights from Guadalcanal, such as these verification techniques via pronunciation, shaped U.S. efforts for the duration of the Pacific Campaign. Later offensives featured refinements in methods, supply chains, and teamwork. The seaborne invasions from Tarawa onward to the Marianas, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa drew upon the lessons absorbed at Guadalcanal. Though we lack equivalent documentation for accent checks in those ensuing engagements, the idea of utilizing linguistic variances for the effectiveness of pronunciation testing for security remained robust. Deeper insights into phonology and how languages are learned, which justified why the method succeeded, emerged only afterward through studies done amid and following the conflict. Yet the troops on Guadalcanal had no need for theoretical linguistics to spot that Japanese individuals struggled with English L sounds, a challenge that proved useful in detecting spies. Such insight exemplifies top-tier hands-on expertise, insights drawn from real-world encounters and deployed to address pressing issues. The lasting effects of this wartime technique reach far past battlefield chronicles. Awareness that speech patterns can act as dependable markers has shaped safeguard protocols in later wars. In the Vietnam conflict, U.S. troops drew on comparable ideas, tailored to distinct sound differences. In modern engagements, speech examination has grown far more advanced, blending vocal tension detection and regional dialect recognition tools that surpass basic sound checks. The moral aspects of such pronunciation assessments warrant examination too. In contrast to certain protective tactics involving trickery or bodily injury, this approach was purely evaluative. It pinpointed language origins without inflicting damage apart from the fallout of unsuccessful verification. Personnel who succeeded faced no adverse outcomes. Failures flagged them as likely intruders, based on clear auditory proof of mismatched speech proficiency rather than biased judgments. This milder quality relative to harsher or forceful defenses ensured its alignment with wartime regulations and Geneva protocols. Moreover, the method underscores a key idea regarding personal and cultural ties. Japanese Americans in the Pacific Theater, including military intelligence service members, cleared these checks effortlessly since their speech aligned with American norms, irrespective of ancestral roots. This proved the evaluation centered on linguistic upbringing, not heritage or racial traits. The link between Japanese nationality and native speech, rather than lineage alone, rendered it potent against foes posing as allies. Though not always clearly stated at the time, this nuance carried weighty lessons on linking speech, selfhood, and protection. Beyond strategies and safeguards, the Guadalcanal effort reveals profound humanity. Fighters on both sides, U.S. and Japanese, showed bravery, resolve, and flexibility amid one of the toughest battles. Credit goes to the Americans who devised and executed the pronunciation system for their resourceful ingenuity. Their Japanese counterparts, equally adept and resolute, contended in dire straits, far from base with faltering logistics. After the war, explorations of the sound mechanics behind the test's success deepened knowledge of human speech development. Scholars in linguistics and brain studies, often wartime intelligence veterans, delved into how adults pick up non-native pronunciations. Work by experts like Patricia Kuhl and colleagues showed newborns can discern sound distinctions across all languages, yet this broad skill tightens in the initial year as the mind attunes to homeland phonemes. This brain's dedication to early sound patterns, vital for smooth communication, precisely generates the barriers that empowered the wartime checks. Grown Japanese learners tackling English L and R weren't just practicing mouth movements, they were striving to reshape long-fixed brain sound filters, a challenge neuroscience now deems highly arduous and rarely fully surmountable. World War II's pronunciation evaluations also shaped inquiries into accented talk. Prior to the conflict, such speech was typically seen as mere faulty delivery fixable by drills. Later analyses uncovered it as rooted in core variances in sound handling, beyond basic mistakes. This perspective spurred refined teaching methods and accepted that grown-up learners, no matter their diligence, typically keep traces of their original speech patterns from their mother tongue for military protection purposes. This ensured that checks on accents would continue to serve as a practical way to spot infiltrators in later battles, where contrasts in languages between opposing sides could be leveraged for defensive advantages. The concept has appeared in different iterations during following wars, although contemporary tech has introduced methods such as vocal tension detection and language pattern analysis that go far beyond basic accent checks. The example of Technical Sergeant Paul Yamamoto, a figure we can't confirm via official archives, yet emblematic of the numerous Japanese Americans who served faithfully, highlights the intricate layers of accent verification during a conflict where U.S. troops included Japanese Americans fighting dedicatedly even as their relatives endured internment. These Nisei troops, raised speaking English fluently, proved via their natural accents that language ties aren't confined to ethnic boundaries. On the flip side, infiltrating Japanese troops expose themselves through their foreign-sounding speech, showing that linguistic roots stem from early environmental immersion rather than heritage alone. As summer 1945 unfolded, efforts ramped up for what was widely anticipated as the war's most brutal closing chapter in the Pacific. An assault on Japan's core islands would thrust U.S. personnel into settings where spotting enemy spies proved tougher than on remote atolls. Adversaries could draw from abundant local supplies, blend in with civilian garb, and possibly gain aid from residents. In such conditions, dependable verification steps became essential. Strategies emerged for thorough safeguards, merging accent exams with detailed paperwork mandates, bodily markers, and confined access areas. These safeguards accounted for the chance that certain Japanese people with early English contact or remarkable language skills might try to sneak in despite accent scrutiny. Layered defenses aimed to offer backup checks to snare even clever espionage bids. Such strategies never came to full fruition thanks to Japan's capitulation after the nuclear strikes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, yet they marked the peak of ongoing refinements in language-based defenses over the years. After the war, numerous files on Pacific security tactics were released from secrecy. The eventual disclosure of these records in later years offered compelling glimpses into many facets of the theater's campaigns. Scholars uncovered abundant records on the creation, rollout, and impact of diverse protective tactics, although details on accent testing stayed mostly confined to the Hurlbut account and the Gramling mention. This narrative underscores how victories in battle rely on myriad minor breakthroughs crafted by frontline personnel tackling urgent issues with straightforward fixes. Acknowledging that dialect variations could aid in verifying identities showcased sharp ingenuity and adaptable fieldwork. The routine deployment of L-based codes at Guadalcanal, even if less intricate than certain retellings imply, embodied true ingenuity tackling a tangible vulnerability. In our time, the tale of accent checks at Guadalcanal endures as a modest yet noteworthy segment in the broader saga of the Pacific Campaign. It reveals how speech, the essence of human interaction, can influence armed struggle. It demonstrates that grasping phonetic disparities across tongues can yield battlefield edges. And it proves that triumphs in combat frequently arise from blending grand strategic choices with innumerable subtle on-the-ground tweaks devised by troops confronting pressing threats. A thorough and candid review of the archives discloses both the strengths and constraints of accent verification as a protective tool. It succeeded at Guadalcanal, equipping units with a swift, dependable means to flag possible spies. The approach fits seamlessly with the phonetic contrasts between Japanese and English sound structures, but it wasn't flawless, not a sweeping effort across the Pacific, and not the sophisticated scheme portrayed in some widespread narratives. By grasping precisely what records indicate and candidly noting their boundaries, we pay tribute to Pacific fighters' legacy while upholding the rigorous truthfulness that sound historiography demands. The Leathernecks at Guadalcanal confronted immense hurdles in one of the initial large-scale U.S. advances of the Pacific conflict. Their creation of effective safeguards such as accent testing, paired with their bravery under fire and resolve in securing Hen, the defense at Urson Field amid relentless assaults from Japanese troops, played a pivotal role in securing a pivotal triumph that altered the trajectory of the Pacific theater. The essence of this authenticated account continues to resonate strongly. U.S. military personnel capitalized on key disparities in the articulation and interpretation of liquid consonants between Japanese and English speakers to devise a straightforward, reliable safeguard that proved challenging to replicate. Such deployment of linguistic insights, stemming from deliberate analysis or hands-on experience, exemplified the precise sort of clever strategy that propelled the Allies to success in the Pacific.